A very good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here on the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV. Well, just in case you're wondering where we are, just visit YouTube. That's where we're streaming. I'm your host, Judith Atim, and today we're discussing three issues or developments that have been playing out in the news over the last few days or the past week. The first is the rather undiplomatic happenings in some of our missions abroad. The second issue we're taking a keen look at is the state of multi-party politics in Uganda, bearing in mind that the events that have been taking place in the Forum for Democratic Change Party and other opposition parties. As you're aware, on Monday this week, the Forum for Democratic Change Katonga faction held its National Delegates Conference. But FDC Najanankumbi maintains that it does not recognize the Katonga faction. But we shall be looking at this, not just FDC, but also what's happening in other opposition parties. And lastly, we shall also take a look at developments further afield. That's the US elections. What is happening? What is the latest? Well, we know Kamala Harris has received the endorsement of the Democratic Party at the ongoing Democratic National Convention. We shall be talking about this and so much more. But first of all, let me take this opportunity to welcome our special guest, Ms. Ingrid Turinawe from the FDC Katonga faction. Ingrid, good to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good afternoon, viewers.
And we look to having you many times in future.
I'll be present.
Also, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, good to have you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
Joseph Othieno, UPC Ideologue. Joseph, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, and of course, Ingrid is massively welcome. I'm really surprised that maybe your producers didn't do a good job, searching for her numbers, but that is the first time. There's always a first time, so it's a pleasure to have you, Ingrid.
Thank you so much.
Okay, last but not least, Major Retired Awich Pollar, Director External Services at the National Resistance Movement Party. Major, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you, and greeting to our viewers.
Thank you very much. So, Ingrid, good to have you. But just briefly, what have you been up to? Just in about a minute, as an icebreaker.
First of all, let me first correct you, because we are not a Katonga faction. We are FDC, PO Box, Katonga, Prot 6.
Okay.
Prot 6 Katonga, FDC, not a faction.
Okay.
So, as you know, I'm a founder of FDC. I'm actually also a founder of Reform Agenda. At the moment, we are going through a transition. We had a delegates conference the other day, which was coming as a result of the previous delegates conference that came out with a resolution asking us to go and consult our people in the districts. Those are the owners of the party. They had requested us to go and consult on what way forward we should take. And after the consultations we made in the 20 sub-regions, our constitution divides Uganda for mobilization purposes. Uganda is divided into 20 sub-regions. The usual sub-regions, like Teso, Acholi, West Nile, the usual ones plus extra ones, which come out of Uganda. Uganda was divided into 5. We have Uganda East, Uganda South, Uganda North. Then we have Kampala as a sub-region. We treat the divisions of Kampala, that is Machinye, Kawempe, the 5 divisions, we treat them as districts operating under a sub-region of Kampala for purposes of mobilization. And that is our constitution. The regions are listed here. So we consulted the 20 sub-regions, and in every region, every sub-region would invite the leaders in the districts that form that sub-region. We consulted them on the way forward. Because of the problems that we had faced in the party, whereby our own party, the FDC party that we have toiled for all these years, some of us have volunteered to be tortured on behalf of the cause, on behalf of, we have suffered on behalf of the cause. But just from nowhere, some few people, few individuals just come and put it on auction. So we said, no, we cannot be part of this. Because we founded FDC with objectives. We have a mission, we have a vision, we have goals, and all are listed well in the Constitution. So we agreed that when we founded FDC, since we had a path that we were supposed to take and a destiny where we were going, now that a few leaders who are in charge of the party have deviated from the real cause, we cannot go with them. When you agree to go with someone to massacre and the person end up going to Ruero, I think you take another vehicle or you abandon the journey, you make sure that you redirect the journey to where you are going. So as of now, the destiny of our cause is, I cannot say that it is only distorted, but anyway, it is distorted, yes, but it has, the party has deviated from the rail of the journey, and we decided to consult. So all the people we consulted, all our leaders said, no, we can no longer reconcile, because among the many objectives that we set up FDC was to make sure that we dislodge the dictator and we get a good governance for Ugandans. At the moment, FDC is not about dislodging the dictator. It's not pursuing that cause. Instead, they are working for the dictator, who is now funding the activities, who is giving them the programs. Basically, they are working according to the will of the dictator. Okay. So some of us said no. And it started slowly, like myself. I was in the top leadership of the party. These things started happening. I started talking about it. I was harassed, I was haunted, to the extent of being dismissed from the party without reason. So I tried to talk to my colleagues who at that time did not know what was going on, but they could not understand me, because out of protest, I had decided to go and contest independent, because I didn't want to associate with them anymore. The electoral processes which we used to have, the internal processes had been completely disregarded, the real processes. They were becoming dictators. We used to have a tribunal that would look into the petitions out of the complaints. It had been disbanded. It wasn't there. So it was just a one-man's show who had decided to appoint candidates. In protest, I said, I'm going independent. And in our constitution, it's not me as the first person to go independent. When you are dissatisfied, you protest. Because for me, I know how to protect my rights, and I've always been using protest as my tool. But surprisingly, I'm not the only one who has gone independent. Before and maybe after me, there have been candidates who are going independent. But for me, I personally received a letter. Going independent, the Constitution also allows you to come back after the election. But I was not given that chance. Meanwhile, the situation was getting worse. And I gave it time. I decided to have a rest. Because even people that I thought would hear me out, they were not understanding me. They thought I was defiant. They thought I was spoiling the party. So when they didn't understand me, I decided to take the break. That's how I ended up. I saw Monitor was writing that I had gone into political exile. No, it was my personal decision to have these other people also see what I had seen. But maybe somehow, somewhere, I regret, I somehow think that if they had had me then, maybe we would have saved something. But now we are at the level where we cannot save anything, and we are, as we consulted, that's what I was talking about, all our leaders said we can no longer reconcile with them.
Okay.
So,
sorry.
We had a delegates conference which debated the resolutions we got from the different regions. And the delegates conference has now resolved that, one, we implement Article 36, which talks about dissolution. This is our constitution. Because the framers of this constitution, I think they were wise, because we made this constitution and we anticipated that all these things can happen because many things were going on in parties. So we have decided to implement Article 36, which allows the delegates to dissolve the party whenever it's no longer serving the purpose that it was founded for. After dissolving, we have also resolved to form a new party. Of course, there were other resolutions, but I will not go into all the resolutions as they were passed. I'm just mentioning these main ones. The dissolution of the party, some people are asking us, why are you dissolving? Why don't you form another party and then you move on, you leave those people also to be? First of all, Najana Nkumbi is not their home. Najana Nkumbi is our home. We paid for it. We paid for it through sacrifice, both financially, and we paid with our blood, we paid with our sweat. So it's not their property. But the dissolution action that we are taking is also a deliberate action that seeks to address vices where someone in a position of power can think that he will always disorganize parties and disorganize democracy. And he comes proudly to talk about it and says, by such and such a time, there will be no parties. Parties are part of democracy. When you don't have stable parties, the country cannot have democracy. So we are taking this action. It's so painful. I don't say, or I don't even think that because some people thought that we had done it then, we have procedures which are also clearly stated in the Constitution. We have to get district resolutions of the 2/3 of the districts. We have to give a notice of dissolution, which notice must be 6 months. Then we got the process of voting, and the decision must be voted for by the delegates who form 80%. So that process has started, and soon the notice will be out. But clearly we ask Ugandans, whoever is interested in democracy and whoever is a peace-loving Ugandan should support our cause of dissolution, so that next time Mr. Museveni should know that parties are formed for a cause and by the people. He should not just come from nowhere and start buying off these parties. So this is the action we are going to take. It's very painful, but we are ready and we are determined. We hope we will also organize other founder members who are no longer with us, but they are interested in what they formed. We think in that way we can reserve our history, where our children and our grandchildren and our great-great-great-grandchildren will read that there was a party FDC which did this, and brought a tremendous success or tremendous change in the country, because we have achieved a lot, despite the difficulties we are going through and the challenges we faced. but we achieved a lot.
Thank
So
you.
we are planning to have this so that we can preserve our history, and then we can stop the vice of having Mr. Museveni going to conquer, capture, sell, and take over these parties in the country.
Thank you, Ingrid. We shall come back to you again.
Okay.
Let me move on to the other panelists. Sarah, I'd just like you to weigh in on and speak broadly to the question of multipartism and its relevance, and basically how strong our opposition is in terms of taking over power at some point in time. Where do you see our opposition parties?
Well, do we have multi-party politics in this country? I think it's just largely in a name. Ugandans preferred to participate in their governance through a multi-party system. I'm trying to avoid the Article 269 and why we went back. But briefly, at independence, we had political parties. Political parties are basically forces through which citizens organize and participate in their governance. Competition of ideas, spaces to compete and organize and mobilize to take political leadership. So from pre-independence to Idi Amin takeover of power, we had parties in this country. And then we had the disruption of Idi Amin dictatorship, where nobody could mobilize until when the forces came together to overthrow Idi Amin. Then we had the back parties, 1980 elections, 85. We have the first coup, I think there were 3 coups, 85 to 86. You have Basilio Kero, you have others, Lutwa, until when NRM took over. So NRM then bans parties and confines their activities at headquarters. Some people then used to say that NRM was scared of Obote and the popularity of UPC. And myself as a child, growing up in Bushenyi, which was known as the home of Obote, I knew how strong UPC was. After the ban of parties, the leaders of UPC are the ones who participated in NRM and abroad-based activities, meaning that maybe if these parties had remained, some of these people then would have stayed in their parties. Maybe they wouldn't have served under the so-called broad-based government of NRM. Come the making of the 1995 Constitution, you have Article 269, the infamous article that confined party activities at headquarters, and the court processes began, led by UPC and DP. So you had the likes of Kawanga Semogere, you had the likes of Dr. Ranyarari and others battling it out in court to fight for the political rights and freedoms of Ugandans, until when the first referendum law was nullified, then the second referendum that ushered us back to the multi-party dispensation. But what are the basic minimums for a multi-party political system to flourish? You should have political freedoms. Is every party free to mobilize, market their agenda, recruit members, fundraise, and go about their business? No. You have the NRM. If I compare with the football, game, you have the NRM tying the other 11 on the other side. And for them, they are free and they are playing with people whose hands are tied. Once your hands are tied, your legs can't move. That's how I would describe the current multi-party dispensation. The only free entity is NRM. NRM can get all the money they want, including raiding our treasury. They never even declare their sources. Their membership is free. You don't see any system that brings money into NRM except taxpayers' money. During elections, they will stage manage dinners where these rich men that we see now going around the country with the speak will attend. They will pledge money. After elections, the same money they pledged, 10 times they will ask for bailouts. So if somebody pledges 100 million, expect a request of billions in the next parliament immediately after opening. Oh, let's set up so and so. He was with us in the war. That's how taxpayers' money is expended through political thuggery. On the other hand, you have the Political Parties and Organizations Act that constrains the fundraising of political parties. For any single donor, a political party cannot go beyond 400 million. What can a party do with 400 million? It can't even run an NGO. Small NGO like mine, you can't run it with 400 million. But you limit a political party that is supposed to mobilize in every village in Uganda. One donor, 400 million. How many donors can parties find? Usually it is 1 or 2. So at most you raise less than $1 billion. What work do you do? You can only pay rent and clean your office. You can't do political work with that money. That is the first padlock on political parties in Uganda. The second padlock is on the environment. If you try to say, I will put fuel in my car, you will meet the police, you will meet the army, they will beat you, they will come to your home. We used to see them coming to Madam Ingrid's home all the time. They will look for wherever you stay, they will look for your children because you are going about your work, enjoying your rights under Article 72 of the Constitution. It's no wonder that even garbage collapses and kills people in this country, because the job of police and the army is political policing. It is not security for the country and the people. It is security to keep one entity in power. That's the second roadblock, which is major. The third roadblock, the people are intimidated. There are fewer people who can say, I am NUP, I am FDC, I am DP, I am UPC. It's no wonder that some factions, every party has factions. The cowards that want to dine on table while pretending to be with the other side. So these political parties trying to say they are in alliance with NRM. Under a multi-party dispensation, you can have a government of a coalition in power. So that if you are in alliance with UPC, DP like we see, and now the members of FDC, you have a coalition government that implements a coalition agenda. Do we have this now? No. We just have a few people getting handout posts. Akena's wife is this. The UPC modes that were now brought to ambassadors here and there and messing up. You have all this chain. So then you have the NRM, of course, implementing their agenda. You see Mao with the cooperation agreement, my good friend Norbert Mao, we signed the cooperation agreement, first 100 days, zero. Has he achieved anything? Before you know it, the president is there saying, I don't know what Mao is talking about. That's the vulgarization of politics in this country. You come to the basic civil and political rights in this country. We are under siege as a people. So that's what I can say about the state of affairs.
Thank you, Sarah. Let me move on to you, Joseph. You identify as a member of the UPC.
I do not identify.
Well, you are a member of the UPC.
I'm a senior member and a senior leader with one people.
Okay. We're talking about factions, like Sarah put it. I mean, also Madam Ingrid said Katonga is not a faction. But in the eyes of the public, people see two different entities, basically, calling themselves one. Also with UPC, if you speak to some other members of your party, they'll say, well, we don't recognize these people, or we're the ones who are actually UPC and so on. We see these conversations take place a lot. What do you make of all these fissures that emerge in our political parties and what they speak to our multi-party politics collectively, but also, I mean, the goal of all opposition parties is to get to power. But what does this actually mean for opposition getting to power when we have all these fissures and factions emerging in the different parties?
You've asked me very many questions, and it's really a pity, really, Ingrid. We haven't really ever been on a panel together. And as Ingrid was submitting, I don't want to hold it, I don't want to pretend. I actually get the emotions with which she speaks, and her emotions strike me, and I look back to my own very long walk to this rather sometimes lonely and thankless job of what we're doing. And I suddenly realized that I've actually been campaigning against this regime since effectively 1987. That's a very long time. And I also look back, yeah, it's a long time. In other words, my entire adult life. And I then look back to my relative privilege. I was on some network the other day, and the presenter and the producers were continuously drawing what they think are my relative advantage in terms of experience on political parties, as you're suggesting, both home and abroad. And you know, it's actually very sad because of what I know and what I've seen of ideally what political parties should be and what ideally should be happening in this country relative to other countries across this continent and indeed other countries around the world. And Judith, I very early on in my campaigns got the privilege, I usually say it, but deliberately, to be a member and a leader and an activist in one of the most powerful global political parties, the British Labour Party. As Ingrid is laboring with our constitution, I look at my own experience as a branch chairman of a local Labour Party, a branch secretary, constituency secretary, and I engage with ordinary members of the party. You guys, democracy is a sweet thing. Competitive polity is beautiful. Membership of political parties and organizations where you meet an average, young, decent 18-year-old who decides to join a political party and goes to a local branch party meeting. The issues as discussed are fantastic. They're impressive. So no wonder in democracies, nations grow, peoples grow, and you see a young 20-year-old over a period of 10 years translates and becomes and has got capacity of being a national leader. Now that's what politics ideally is all about, peoples. The only thing when it comes to the question of competition of ideas that Sarah was talking about is simply that you bring in the political parties and organizations depending on their foundations and whatever grievances and bases, and then the ideological orientations, where then the contestations is about really not whether, but rather which way, whether you sit on the left of politics, on the right of politics, whether you believe in big government or small government, in usually conservatism, or whether you believe that governments have got a lead role in engaging more actively and corrosively in the economy, or ordinary citizens, maybe through organizations, trade unions, others, should engage and make sure that, well, they own the process of means of production. Those are what this thing should be all about. Now, something went fundamentally wrong in this country. And I'm just shocked that after 40 years of NRA, a critical majority of people in this country, of our age group and exposure, simply can allow themselves to be driven as zombies by one man with a completely failed political experiment in the name of Mr. Museveni, and cause the kind of harm I see around this table. That said, differences in political parties and organizations occur. Drawing it back to what we'd others call factions and differences. They occur in every political party. You know, the Democratic Party of America, as they're concluding their convention, pre the resignation or withdrawal of President Biden, they had a series of internal conversations away from whether or not Biden should continue as a leader. They sort of like resolved, they almost certainly going to win elections. The Republican political party was nearly dead the other time. You know, whatever happens, the British Labour Party, my other party, they came from mini oblivion after the disastrous decision by Blair to support Bush in going to, you know, kill Iraqis over their oil, you know, to now a massive, huge majority. These things do happen. And the Labour Party have said the last Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, is a friend, the Labour political parties. But it's now almost like a no name on the mainstream. It happens, differences. And finally, the first major political party in this country, Uganda National Congress, which is basically my party, you know, it expelled the first president, Ignatius Musazi, in 1959. So differences do occur. It was actually not, they expelled the founding president, meaning these conversations can take place. Kale Kaihura, who was busy beating the likes of the Ingrids, you know, his father was amongst the founding members of Uganda National Congress, and they engaged in very constructive, ideological conversations around which form political process in our country should take, leading to our independence. Now, once Musazi was expelled in 1959, Obote takes over, you know, Obote is elected president. And by 1969, Obote is able to help reunite the party and reconstitute Uganda People's Congress. Differences in political parties do take place. In 1980, Sarah, I was slightly older than yourself, you know, but if you guys can read from history, Yusuf Lule, you know, and Paul Kawanga. Lule was locked out of the DP convention, lest people forget, you know, over the leadership question, because Lule wanted to be leader, Kawanga Semogere wanted to be leader, and cheekily, of course, they said that Obote and Nyeri had locked him out. But those internal differences do take place.
Locked him up?
No, there's a locking themselves up really amongst themselves. No, forget about actually the State House thing which Museveni did, you know. But much later in DP. So meaning deep, within DP, away from Museveni, you know, conflicts do exist in political parties and organizations. But when it fast forwards to the mess in which we are today in Uganda People's Congress, and you're right, of course, if you're suggesting that, in ours is actually quite clearly there are two factions. And I find myself in a slightly different position, difficult position, by suggesting, of course, authoritatively that I don't belong to factions, that I'm too big for factions. Why? Because there is an Akena faction, which is quite clearly an interest group with Comrade Museveni. That's the facts of it. And then there's a Walubiri faction, which legally they can go ahead and have their arguments. But if you go ahead and see what they're doing, they're neither here nor there, 4 members of Uganda People's Congress. But then when you go into the details of one of these conversations, the unfortunate thing is, it's not about the constitution of the party. It's not about the rules of the game. It's not about the values of the game. It's not about the drive for our country and our peoples, but rather self-individual interests. And so it's very unfortunate for our colleagues in the FDC. As partly Ingrid says, many Ugandans were quite relieved to see Dr. Besigye emerge out of NRM rather courageously in 1999, 2000, you know, to found a vehicle that they believed at the time would push for change in this country. It's actually very sad that looking from the year 2000 to now, 25 years later, you know, the kind of conversations we're having. So you ask, is it Ugandans or is it? But fortunately, I took limited because I think it's a bit of a long conversation. It's very clearly the case that somewhere, somehow, Mr. Museveni is seeking to play the last laugh. Because whereas these guys came out and courageously mobilized and organized, it's very clearly the case that the state's interest has been central in this. But what I've always been asking Ingrid, you and I are now in this because we are the direct, much more political activists in this. How is it that some of our own colleagues in political parties, because in UPC's case there is also that, there is where Museveni went and targeted UPC leaders and actually did so, including where I was leading in UK, and such as and broke our systems. Those are there. But what about these cases where individual members of our political parties and organizations, upon their own volitions, go and expose themselves to Mr. Museveni? That, to me, then becomes the more worrying thing. So therefore, for those of us then going forward as political leaders and political organizations, how are we able to work around and make sure that we get a critical number of Ugandans who are conscious enough for change and conscious enough for the future, but have the capacity and the energy and the resolve to play selfless like you and others have been playing is our challenge.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Let me move to you, Major. From the submissions by the three and also what we read, clearly the opposition in Uganda operates in quite precarious situations. The environment seems to be hostile, especially when you go into, say, election period. We've had incidents of, say, RDCs blocking opposition politicians from actually talking to the public, selling their agenda and manifestos to voters. We've seen issues of oftentimes the playing field is not leveled and so on. But we do have a government on one side which says we've brought multipartism, we actually embrace it and so on. But when you see these kinds of developments and accusations that government is infiltrating maybe opposition political parties and so on, what is your impression and what's your reading of some of these issues that emerge?
Well, my impression is that it is the lack of stability in the other political parties gives a vague view about multi-party system in Uganda, which is not good. I would like to say that for some of us who have been in NRM, especially who came with it from the military wing, who were exposed to NRM methods of work and ideology, we really didn't want multi-party. We didn't.
Yeah.
And that is why when the referendum was put to the people to decide whether we go multi-party or not, some of us opposed it. I opposed it myself. I said, no, we remain in NRM. And I had my views. And now that we're in this situation of confusion, some of us will be said, I think you are right. And that is why in the constitution making, we have strongly advocated that we also define a movement as a political system. Although the constitution says that if one is in place, the other is in abeyance. So those of us who still believe in the movement, we know and console ourselves that our movement is still in abeyance, but it's in the constitution. So, but here we are. We had warned our opponents that you are going for political parties. The rule of the game is not good. We said, for example, under movement, you could impeach a minister. Even the Attorney General would vote in favor of a motion to impeach a minister, and it would pass. But now if a minister walked naked from Kampala City Square to Parliament, we would say it is the opposition who bewitched it. So, and the movement system, we even warned them that now that you're going multi-party, should you go and contest if you're under secretary, you won't come back. And that did a lot of harm because to a big extent, the competently qualified members of the community now fear to go for political election because you want to come back. And it has opened ways for unqualified members. We now, everybody has been crying about the quality of participation of legislature. How would you have quality of legislature when 60% are locked up under the law purportedly under multi-party that you don't go? It reduces the quality because big number of people are locked out there. You don't want to come out. Now, I want to say that as NRM, we don't celebrate for the misfortunes of conflicts in parties. No, there are colleagues who believe that a multi-party system should function with other parties. So if we were NRM alone, then we wouldn't be I mean, it would not be a democratic system since we agreed to play the rule of the game of multi-party. So take it from me that we don't celebrate when UPC is fighting. We don't celebrate when FDC is fighting. We don't celebrate when DP is their business, it's their business. That is our position. If you went to plot 10, you don't get anybody in plot 10 being happy about it. We wish them well, and they should handle their matters. My only concern with Ingrid is that she says the people who were in charge deviated. Well, lawyer as I am, I was saying if you add that paragraph in an affidavit, it would be a problem, because if you mandate people and you say they're in charge, you are bound by their decision. So it becomes difficult to judge how wrong they are because you mandated them. So it becomes difficult to say you are in charge, you have made you a party president, a party this, the constitution states the decisions they should make, and when they make that, then you say, ideally there should be methods of resolving that. Either you wait for the period that is given to them, okay, or unless you want to challenge their decision in courts of law. But you said they were in charge. That is what it means by them being in charge. And that is the best that they could decide. In the case of FDC now, I wish them well, but my only worry, and that has affected UPC, is that all this laborious process you're laboring to do, the final product will be a dissolution. That is the fruit you will get. After getting that, so what? UPC tried through courts of law to say the legally recognized UPC is this. The implementation or the enforcement officer is supposed to be Election Commission. You go to Election Commission, but we are the one. Let us nominate candidate. We are the ones to nominate. Say no. Give us the money that is given under to Election Commission from government. They say no. So I'm just telling you that while you get this and get the fruit of the dissolution, the implementation and the enforcement will still be a hurdle. And how I wish a judicial pronouncement or a position is taken for the good of the country. But there's a problem that has affected UPC. You have what you think is a legitimate UPC and the enforcement person. For example, the UPC that is supposed to nominate a candidate with a headed paper, you nominate, they say, are you crazy? Then they accept nomination from the other. The money which is supposed to be given to the particular party, they say, are you crazy? Then they give. So I pray for you that your product is enforced. And also to further warn you that your dismissal, I hope nobody uses it as a matter in point. For example, even in the forum you sit, that your dismissal was not revoked or you didn't appeal against it, that it is done, so that if you were in a constituted body, they will say it is an illegality because your position, the decision was not revoked. I don't know who should revoke it. I'm just thinking ahead. So that is really in regard to the FDC. Now, for the political body system that Dr. Sarah talked about, Sarah's worry is that the multi-party system that it is dysfunctional, and the dysfunctionality is because of NRM. I started with a disclaimer that some of us didn't believe in this, but being as it is, as law-abiding citizens, we are now playing by the rule of the game. Now, the rule of the game, Sarah, involves a lot of ingredients. Like the specific activities that you are talking about are governed by the law. Because after we took up the multi-party, several enactments came in place. How to govern yourself, how to raise money, how to do that. And all those are matters of law. So if you were not convinced as a lawyer, I think you would have tackled the law than tackle NRM. The 60s that you praise as a political multi-party system, to me, it was more vague and weak than what it is now. For example, in those days, there was a provision of crossing the floor, meaning that if I knew I'm from Nyabushozi and FDC cannot win, I would win in Nyabushozi under NRM. And when I reach Kampala, I cross the floor. Is that the democracy that we're talking of? It was multi-party. So people would purport to be elected from their areas and deceiving the people in the party that the people know when they reach here, they go. In our enhanced and developed system under the movement, that is the government of the movement, we blocked that. We said, if you stand in Nyabushozi under NRM and you come to Kampala and you want to be sweetened by the bread that you see here, first lose the seat. Lose the seat, then cross. Okay? So the 60s that you are praising was a weak democratic system where even the UPC party leader then arrested members of parliament. They just came to and said it. I know you will say there was a raid, but is that the strength?
has done the same.
So,
Actually, was.
the political, the multi-party system that it is now is enhanced with a stronger law and guarding that it works as a multi-party. Now, the status of political parties therefore now is much safer and much stronger. Funds are being given for the first time. The government said to make our parties not be vulnerable to Sweden, to Norway, to what? Let those parties who have proved their worth and having their parties in parliament, their members in parliament, let them be given money. So every party is benefiting from the taxpayers' money, including Loop, which gets billions. This is further to tell you that right now, the status of multi-party system is more serene, governed, funded with law that governs it. If you have issues with the law, laws are not casted on stones. If you think the minimum of raising per donor 400 million is too low, laws are not cast on stones. It can be debated. But you don't really say the political situation, and especially if it is bad, is brought by NRM. We can't campaign in anarchy. And that is why the laws about gathering people, how to organize yourself, where to go. For us as a party, as NRM, we have actually decided that we are not going to move on the street for NRM Oye, NRM Oye. We are basing on service delivery. We meet people in small groups and we talk to people. We ensure that people, money are entering their pocket, their welfare.
Okay.
So I like to appeal to the viewers that comparing the political system of the 60s and now, the current multi-party system is more enhanced. The challenge is with the cadres in particular parties, and we are not there to help them develop their cadres. If you put in charge, as Ingrid said, the people in charge, and they succumb to whatever test that they need, then that is the problem with their cadreship. But for us, we do think that we should strengthen this as the law demands, while movement is in abeyance as provided by Constitution.
Thank you very much, Major. Ingrid, I'm coming to you, but as you respond to what major submissions, I'd also like you to answer this. Again, in the eyes of the public, like I said earlier, people see two FDCs. That it's a perception that you're not going to actually be able to take away from the minds of the public. Where you sit, you'll say this is the real FDC, but the public sees something else. We're in a critical time. We're heading into elections in 2026. And I think people would actually want to understand exactly what is going on, which party is which. But what I want you to answer in particular is the strength of the party. When you look at where you are right now, do you think you're in a strong position to actually win the public support and trust and claim some good positions, let's say in parliament or even in the presidency, if you're going to field a candidate for that position? Do you see yourself as a strong party that can actually claim that space?
Starting with a public view about FDC as a fractured party, we really understand, and we know, yes, we know, because now even if even if you're on the streets and you introduce yourself as FDC, the next question they ask you is which
one?
FDC?
Which one?
And you feel so sad. But we have to face the reality. It's true, we have been sent into that situation. There is FDC in Najanankumbi. Those people are a circuit of thieves. They are betrayers. They have disappointed the cause. But we are not going to give up. That's why we are coming up to say, because for them they had thought they would just chase away everybody and they continue with what they are doing. So that's why we are taking this other step of saying it must stop there. Let them also be out of our headquarters. Let them go and rent somewhere else or buy. They have money. They have money, they can buy other headquarters. And they can also register another party. But not using our own sweat and our own blood and our own work to continue tarnishing what we had already achieved. For example, we've been in the field several times, especially with Dr. Besigye, and we have pulled massive support, including winning elections, though we have not been announced winners. Like in 2016, it was obvious that we won elections, and in other elections. So I want you to reflect. Have you ever seen in our rallies the massive support that we have had? Have we ever seen us serving alcohol on rallies? Never. We have never done that because people come out of their will. We have never rented support. We have never ferried people from different districts to come and hear our message. Never. So whatever is going on now, that is the pain we have, that we must preserve what we had achieved, because what is going on is not our method, is not our cause, is not our goal, is not part of our mission, and we must stop and put it to an end. So about the strength of the party, I can admit that our people, before, in the last few months, in the maybe like a year, they had lost hope. But with the just concluded delegates conference, hope has come back. And they are only waiting for us. Just before I came here, I met a boda guy. I don't know, he said he's coming from Kasubi or something, somewhere there in the suburbs of Kampala. He had a piece of paper and he had written his proposal. He's saying, me, I'm coming here, I'm proposing that our party should be named like this. And there is a lot of work that is going on to come up with a new name, new slogan, ideology. All that is going on at our headquarters in Katonga now. And many committees have been formed. Everyone is doing work. We are putting together the work that we need to register a new party. So our people have hope. And the moment we reveal and we announce a new party, you will see the massive support that we will get. You will be shocked in the next election, though we feel that even we should not wait for the next election, because if all goes well, we want to start real action to make sure that we end the dictatorship. It has always been our cause. We have been delayed, but we are still at it, and we cannot give up. So just in case we go the next election, it will be, we will use it as a defiant front, as a struggle front, to make sure that we achieve what we have struggled for all this long. And I'm not worried about the strengths. I'm not worried about the support. Supporters are there, only that they have been confused and they had been demoralized by what was going on in Najanankumbi. But soon we have already refocused. We are coming up with new guidelines on how to push the struggle ahead, and we will be there. We are not worried because all these things happen. When you go, the struggle, the journey for the struggle is always with the difficulties and challenges, but we go through them. To comment on what he said, I understand where he's coming from, but I respectfully disagree with him. He started by saying that they didn't want to leave the movement. Yes, that is a fact. And you have continued to implement your mission of not allowing Multiparty to operate in Uganda. So where I disagree with you, though you try to even cast warnings, we are aware of all these things. We know even you can protect Najanankumbi to stay there. You can do anything through courts, through electoral commission, but for us we would have stamped our feet down to say no, and we would have dissociated ourselves from whatever is going on in Najanankumbi, because we know Mr. Museveni is sitting in Najanankumbi. He's funding everything. The traders of alcohol that are being served at the rallies, it is Museveni's work. The e-registration they are moving with, it's very funny, because when you find a political party that has operated for 25 years, you chase away everyone, including deleting the entire register. They have deleted the entire register, and everyone now is regarded as a non-member. Forget about the dismissal I talked about, which was not private. But what has Dr. Besigye done to be deleted from the FDC register in Najanankumbi? And they launch e-registration, and they register from 001, number one member, which means everyone has been deleted and discarded from the register. It has never happened anywhere in the world, but it is happening in Najanankumbi. They are doing fresh recruitment. You said that they are in charge. Yes, we put them in charge. But the inefficiency, the irregularities that have kept them there, do you know that we elected them in 2017? And they spent there 8 years without organizing another election. We were patient with them before everything came out. We were patient with them. They extended their tenure. They continued mismanaging the party, and now the new purported re-election, which was recently done, was their delegates conference was null and void, because the chairman of the party, the legally elected chairman of the party, Ambassador Waswabiri, but did not call that delegates conference. They forged the papers and got someone to call a delegates conference, and they re-elected themselves into new positions after 8 years of illegality, of illegal leadership. And all these things, this is what we are dealing with. But we are saying, no, now that we can no longer reconcile, people who are calling us to reconcile with them, what exactly do they want us to reconcile about? Should we say, okay, we are also accepting now to work from 7? Like they are doing? Will they accept to say, oh, now we have resigned from the assignments that he gave us, and we are now coming back to the real cause of FDC? What exactly can we reconcile about? Nothing. Therefore, let's close it.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and hear from the rest of you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back, and thank you for keeping it with us here on the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV. Well, we were still looking at the multi-party political system in the country and what is the state of affairs. And Madam Ingrid had just finished her submission in response to what Major Pollar had said. Sarah, let's move on to you, and I'd like you to also respond to the parallels that Major Awich drew in terms of what the system was like back then and what it is today.
I just want briefly to explain why NRM is to blame for the state of affairs. NRM has been in power since 1986. What's the role of a government in power when it comes to facilitating democracy? Article 20, Clause 2, you must enable enjoyment of rights and freedoms. Do you do that? No. You must provide for rule of law. Do we have rule of law in this country?
No.
Yes.
We have selective application of the law. We have a half-dead judiciary. I know there are experts profiling how, disadvantaging the judiciary is to the people, including Dr. Kabumba. We have, at times it functions. It's like a faulty clock, because even a faulty clock tells the right time once a day. There will be that time. If it stopped at 3 p.m., there will be time when it is 3 p.m. And you will look at the clock and it's right. That's how the judiciary functions.
Depending on when you look at it.
Yes. You must facilitate citizens' participation in their governance. For you look at putting roadblocks because you fought for power. What we have actually is a facade. We just have gunmen in power. Ruling the bush way.
Unfortunately, worse.
Using laws as propaganda. You must provide law and order. That's the role of government. So these four elements would facilitate in theory. In theory and selectively where they favor you. That's how they are in place. They are not in place for all citizens. We know they are in place. They are in the constitution. The institutions exist. They are fully captured by you people. These four elements function only when it comes to favoring NRM. When they are not favoring NRM, you have the army as the biggest disruptor of democracy in this country. You formerly belonged to it. You people think you rescued Uganda, but now every Ugandan knows you just fought to benefit yourselves. Just a selfish agenda, 80 years. And that's why you have one man in power. Even when he has exhausted all his mental and natural abilities to lead. That's why people are buried by garbage under your leadership. How can security fail to detect that for 2 months that state's garbage has been collapsing until it buries people? Even the army cannot retrieve the dead body. But I'm sure if you were told to go to Sudan where there are dollars, you would go and rescue dead bodies in Sudan, in Somalia or Sudan, but you cannot retrieve the dead bodies of Uganda to have closure. That's how dysfunctional you are as a state. You don't need any other demonstration. State is a demonstration of dysfunctionality of this government, and such a government where garbage buries people cannot facilitate democracy. No. The 4 elements that are roadblocks for democracy in this country. The funding, tilted funding, when you have people have access. Let's use the example of the speaker. In 2 years,
You know?
she has built a fantastic school. She has built a mini state house home. She has a fantastic farm. She has launched a sports complex. An individual is overrunning government. I know that the president has been going to launch these things in Bukedea, but I think maybe he's also incapable of analytically, digesting what are the implications of this, that an individual can can perform in 2 years and exceed the record of government of 10 years or more. And you are there busy launching, I thank Anita, she's bringing development. What is the source of funding? Can she publish the source of her funding? 2, has she repressed the government in Bukede? Is now Anita a moving government in Bukede? And you are there launching, clapping, not knowing that as much as it's a demonstration of corruption, it is also a demonstration of your failures and dysfunctionality as a government. So you look at the violence, that's the second tool. Your major tool for keeping power. Fear and intimidation of the citizens, and then money. Because why is FDC in a state where they are? Money. And this is taxpayers' money. Not saying you get taxpayers' money, you determine how you use it. Of course, maybe Ugandans are used to that and they cannot even push back. Things like Kurbowa, the rest. Give this one money, give this one, as if it's your own money, not knowing that this is public money that must serve the public good. So you get public money and you apportion it and you use it to destroy parties, to destroy competition. And the president has been open, in all his agenda. He goes to Kororo, the international community is watching, all media. I will eat opposition like samosa. I will destroy opposition. And he's using public money to do this. You are dysfunctional. You are a disgrace. It is guns keeping you here. Those guns will give way. That is the state of democracy.
Judith, let's hear from you. I think there are actually comments that Major Awich made in reference to, I think, UPC. I don't remember so well.
Comrade Awich is a decent guy, but he's a decent guy doing a difficult job. But of course, because he's paid, he's got to do his job. But extraordinarily, he nearly started well. But because he really has to make a justification somewhere, Comrade Awich has got the audacity to attempt to draw comparisons particularly with the 60s government. And based on what Sarah said, I would almost certainly not have any more to say. But I want to clearly say that the 1960s contestation, where he was referring to the detention without trial, was one specific incident involving members of government, within the government, not opposition, members of government, who were involved openly in a scheme to overthrow a democratically elected government, and this all came to pass and was evidenced. It's also true that, yes, that was, quote, you can call it detention without trial, flanked by 2 lawyers here, but you know what? Under the circumstances at the time, there was nothing else. In fact, if it hadn't happened that way, we would not have Uganda today as we know it. But number 2, these guys had a fantastic decent time, during the course of their detention. Now, ask from 1986, me who was an adult at Makerere when this bunch came, how many people have been detained without trial? How many people went to Luzira and never came back? How many people sank in concentration camps in northern Uganda? How many people sank, including Bukede in Mukura, by these NRA bandits? If you call that a comparison with that, how many people they killed in Luwero? How many people died, including these others in Kitezi? You can't compare anything NRA with the UPC government, and I think you need energy and courage to be able to do that. But that said, yesterday, Thursday morning, I received a phone call from a relative, and I'll name relative of an extended relative of the top academic registrar of Makerere University, the late Bernard Onyango, telling me of a particular relative of theirs, a deep Uganda People's Congressman who died not so long ago, apparently the other week. But that guy was detained by NRA bandits, This young lady who called me was in the house when this bunch came from the bush. They came in a huge lorry, arrested this guy, and this guy spent 5 years in different prisons only to be released without trial. Now, whether that is a detention without trial or torture without trial, without one specific incident to compare with these NRA bandits with the record for that period of time, it cannot. Look, the 60s, we had a neat democracy. The 80s, we had a neat democracies. Do democracies have faults? I said at the end, much earlier. Political parties and organizations and governments have issues. In the 60s, we had major issues in 1964 during the Lost Country issues, where there was a really contestation between the president and then the prime minister, meaning political conversations. We had 1966 crisis, we can discuss that. We had 1967 constitutional changes, we can discuss that. We had the assassination attempt on Milton Obote in 1969, and indeed we had an overthrown government. But guess what? In 1980, after Idi Amin, when Museveni's bunch went to the bush after losing an election, they lost election in Barara, in Nyabushozi, in Barara North. Instead of going to the courts in Barara, they went to Luweero bushes. But from 1980, while this bunch were busy breaking people's necks in Luweero and throwing bombs in the streets of Kampala, over 4.5 years, you cannot ask leaders of the Democratic Party any experience of members of parliament being humiliated like these ones. Any leaders of opposition, including Paul Semugere, even once experiencing any similar experience, Besigye, Chagulanyi, and many of us opposition leaders have experienced. Ingrid, I've said this. The first time when I felt like sick on the life of Dr. Besigye, please go and report to him. I actually used my Sunday column to report. Was that time when the poor man was bundled as if carcass for hounds.
The hammer incident.
In that thing. NRA. Can you imagine that? And not only leader of opposition, but one of your own former comrades.
The guy who did it ran mad.
Can you imagine that?
Yes.
Can you draw comparisons?
And now he's in reserve.
4.5 years under what? And yet, amidst that, we turned around the national economy. There would be no Kitezi. We turned around the national economy and we overhauled education system. We opened up new schools. We transformed health services, restored our economy, restored our rail services, restored our networks. But amidst that, were there issues? Of course, yes, particularly in Luweero, where those were, and parts of Kampala. And but a certain section of Ankole and the other extensions where there would have been people associated with Museveni, and there would have been people suspect from the opposition side of it, but also there will be cases where members of the governing political party may be overzealous and do the kind of things that the nonsense that Ruth Acheng did in Canada. And in Ruth's case, shame on her doing that. But thankfully, I reject in association with her doing that in the name of the movement. Awich's job is a very difficult job to do, but Awich has got to do it. But to draw comparisons with whatever happened in the two previous administrations is a nay.
Thank you. You want to respond to
Yes,
the submissions
I want
before
to
we
respond. I
wrap up
actually
this
want
segment?
to start with the continuous reference of Awich job. Difficult. Awich job. You know, I am a lawyer and an advocate of the courts of judicature. But my position in the party is the Director External Affairs. If there was any reference to doing a job, as you put it, like propagating, then that would have been the work of the Director of Information and Publication, Honorable Dom. So the continuous reference on my job is derogatory. I come here because this debate intended to pick people from various positions and share your thoughts on it, my thoughts. It only happens that I'm a director. So this continuous derogatory reference on my job as if a director of external affairs is the director of propaganda is totally incorrect.
No, but from that perspective, I'll say to disagree, because you're representing the NRA and you're speaking very authoritatively.
So if that is the case, then you are also doing your job.
Absolutely.
So is your job the easier one?
Oh yes, it's very easy.
Is your job the easier one?
No, it's a voluntary job, but very easy. No, from that point of view,
is your job the easier? So I really want to address the idea that draws connotation in a derogative sense. I have come here, I'm the director external. Ideally, I shouldn't even be here. I should be outside the country doing my work, which is mandated under my docket. But I come here to share my thoughts as anybody. So the negativity of doing his job is totally derogatory.
You're using a strong word, but anyway,
yes.
I'll pass.
So then I come to your mysterious quotes. Your mysterious quotes of somebody who has been detained for 5 years and moving from prison to prison. You may have to adduce in the particular incident because it is a public matter.
Oh yeah, and
otherwise, you do that to mislead the viewers. Because the Article 44 provides for non-derogable rights. For example, habeas corpus. And everybody knows that if somebody was detained and his whereabouts are not known, it is a matter that a right that you can never derogate from. You can derogate from right to life. You can sentence somebody and hang him to death, but you can't remove that right. You can deny somebody food, but you can't remove this right. So if anybody has been moving from prison to prison in such a mysterious quote, you have to adduce it because it's already public evidence. Otherwise, it is intended to mislead. Finally, I want to comment about the particular incident. You also quoted that the incident of arrest and detention without trial was an individual incident. It wasn't. Detention without trial was an act of parliament passed by UPC to say if you are suspected to be about to commit a crime, you are arrested and detained forever. This was done by Grace Bingira, who was Minister of Internal Affairs. Everybody told Bingira, said, this is wrong. Few months later, he was detained under his same law. This was not an isolated incident. It was an institutionalized in the acts of parliament to derail democracy. That when you see him about to detain him without trial for years, 5 years, this was not an incident. This was an institutional, legislated, put in the acts of parliament by the Minister of Internal Affairs, and it was passed into law. Now, the Kitezi one, I would wish somebody who is really in charge to come and say something. It is a fact by fact basis. But I have repeatedly said, colleagues, that no news is good news. No news is good news. Because the bad news are the ones which fetches news. So, one incident, you don't judge the entire government. I have personally here said sorry to that, and I thought somebody should be reprimanded strongly, either by way of interdiction or by way of something I'm yet to see. But that is an incident. So if one incident happens out of 365 days, it wouldn't lead us to a judgment of a whole government. Good news don't make news. Meaning that when Kitezi happens today, the days which we are quiet is actually days government is doing good work. The man who won Olympic medal, they talked about him only for a few hours, gone, as if he had not won a gold medal for Uganda. So, we should be judged by fact, case by case, and therefore Kitezi is a case of its own. It's not an institutionalized detention without trial where a law was passed to detain people they suspect to be wanting to commit crime for years.
Well, thank you very much, Major. Madam Ingrid, you just have a few minutes to go. I don't know if you have any last words that you'd like to share with us and the viewers.
It's unfortunate that I'm not coming at the end of the program, but I want to share with the viewers, especially our members of FDC, please be strong. Some of you had lost energy, some of you had been demoralized by whatever is going on. We are refreshing, we are reloading, and we will be there. Just be strong. Soon we will be communicating as mandated and assigned by the Delegates Conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having you and for you sparing time to actually come be with us here.
Yeah.
We hope to have you again some other time.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's now take the conversation further and look at the recent developments in our diplomatic circles, specifically Canada and the United Arab Emirates. Well, we know the Canadian government last week declared Uganda's High Commissioner, Joy Ruth Acheng, persona non grata. So she's, as a diplomatic agent, she's unacceptable to Canada, which is that state. And just within a few days or a day or two, we again saw the Uganda's deputy head of mission in the United Arab Emirates, also Henry Maiga, also being expelled together with his entire team on grounds that his offices, he had actually turned his office into some kind of an illegal casino business. And it hasn't definitely been going on well. I know the Foreign Affairs Ministry here has been really trying to tone things down, but you can see the frustration, the embarrassment, and every time the State Minister Henry Eloriam speaks, you can feel the disappointment in you can read through his statements or even in his expression. Major, let's start with you. People have been asking for a long time. When we had career diplomats in the past employed to sent abroad to represent us in these foreign missions, we didn't seem to have these kinds of embarrassing episodes happening. But what is the criteria of appointing or deploying our representatives abroad? What does government look at now?
Ambassadors are provided, I think, under the Constitution. The President has the power to appoint competent Ugandans and what he deems competent. However, there's inside there a procedure that the ambassadors should be vetted by Parliament. Therefore, in the views of the appointing authority, who is the head of state, if he thinks that a person is qualified to be an ambassador, he appoints such a person and the names are sent to Parliament. And in this particular case, I think many Ugandans are considered and a few are picked. Their duty ideally is supposed to represent the interest of Uganda. And therefore, the President puts that in consideration when he's appointing them. The position seems not to be the case with a deputy ambassador. Deputy ambassadors seem not to be under the law, vetted by Parliament. So I think it is unapplicable to full ambassadors, which in this case would mean Ruth Acheng, Joy Acheng, was isn't it Joy Ruth?
She's Joy Ruth, yes, it's Joy Ruth Acheng.
Joy Ruth Acheng was passed through Parliament. So we thought...
She was a full ambassador?
Yes, we thought Parliament did a good job. And the other one is the appointment, which does not pass through. But still, the appointing authority picks the best for Uganda. Now, these people, when they're appointed, ideally, they should have their tool of work is the applicable law or the law applicable, which in this case, the Vienna Convention, because it is this convention that establishes diplomatic relations. So this should have been their Bible, sets the do's and do nots. It is well known that ambassadors do espionage. They do intelligence all over the world. It is also known that ambassadors participate in other activities, including in Uganda. We have had complaint that the ambassador of European Union is suspected in this, the European ambassador of this is suspected in that. But you don't get their hands clearly and you have no evidence, so you can't blame them because you have no evidence. In other words, if ambassadors are to represent their interest of the country, you should do it but not in conflict with the Vienna Convention. If you are to organize and do something, it must be done within your confines of capacity, but you should not be in conflict with the law. Because once you're in conflict with that, then you render yourself vulnerable to the host country. Remember, the host country has the power to even accept when you're appointed. when Ruth Joy Cheng is appointed, the name is first presented to the Canadian government. We are posting Joy Ruth Cheng. Do you accept? They do their research. They Google, they ask the ambassadors in Uganda, they do research. And then they said, okay, we accept you to be our ambassador. But then even being accepted, you are expected to play within the confines of the rules. So in this case, the Canadian government found that she fell short of the rules by being particularly involved in the street exercise.
Well, they say she was involved in many it was a culmination of many unresolved issues, which I
yes,
don't know
and they said uncouth. They say uncouth behavior.
Yes.
So the host country reserved the right to say you are our permanent guest, but now we no longer want you to be our guest. That is their right. Now, about choosing ambassadors, the president exercises, regardless of political affiliation. You will notice that the two affected persons, were originally in UPC. Just like many people, including the Speaker of Parliament was in FDC, and the deputy. So, for us in the movement, we welcome people. And once you are welcome, we expect you to know the revolutionary methods of work and show your competency. We forget your history. And therefore, the fact that the two came from the Congress, we didn't care. We expected them to have joined government and work with their competencies that they are endowed with. So if this be the challenge now, then it is unfortunate. However, I want to conclude by saying, Okello Riem says, don't judge her by the incident which was on the street. Judge her by her other performance. The minister says she did a lot of work. She brought investors, she developed our relationship, she did a lot of things. But as I keep telling you here, no news is good news. So this one incident, the bad news, has swept everything. I have repeated here.
Yes.
So all the good things that you do is not hard. Okay. One single thing.
Okay, Major, I want to take you back a bit. These two ambassadors were from the UPC, and they crossed to the ruling party, and they were welcomed, right? If I'm reading between the lines, are you in a way admitting that these positions were actually rewards by the government for these for these individuals crossing to the ruling party? So it wasn't because they are actually competent, but it was an appreciation in quotes for them crossing to the ruling party. Because to anyone listening to this would actually interpret your statement as that.
If that is a question, my answer is not at all. That is not what I'm saying. The import of their background, I am the one who imported their background. The import of their background was to say people are appointed irrespective of your history. In other words, you don't want to say this is a preserve of NRM. People who have been cadres of NRM should be the one, quote in quotes, to eat the job of ambassador. We are saying it is for everybody.
Can't we have career diplomats who are not affiliated, who are non-partisan? Because diplomats are actually supposed to be non-partisan. Don't we have that crop of professionals in this country?
Let me address the issue of career diplomats. Career diplomats ideally is supposed to be a Ugandan recruited by public service through an advert at the initial stage. A university graduate, they advertise for, they call it foreign service officer. You get there, you start with third secretary, promote yourself to second secretary, until first secretary, then minister councillor, and then you are subject to deputy ambassadors and the rest. It's a discretion of states and governments. Some states choose to do that, but many states appoint. For example, the recent ambassador of Japan who left, he was not in any government. He was picked from the business community because Japan believes that their biggest interest is to do business around the world. Commercial diplomacy. So he was picked from nowhere. He told me. Incidentally, the embassy of Japan, we share the common wall with the secretary. So I paid a courtesy call on him. I asked him his background. He said, for me, I was in business. I was just appointed like that. So career diplomats can be, but it's a discretion of government. But even then, if you said you're a career diplomat, career simply means you join through that as practice.
And grow through the ranks.
Grow through the ranks. But remember that every cycle of 5 years, different political parties market their manifesto. The party that wins is the one is in manifesto is being implemented, whether in agriculture, foreign service, health, education. So this now deflate or directs the theory of careerism, because even if you are a career, you are still going to implement the government in power.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yes. So the career is only to the extent of your recruitment and
Project Uganda?
But now it is not true that you cannot be appointed from anywhere. And I already gave you the example of Japan. I already gave you the example of Japan. Therefore, even if somebody was a career diplomat by recruitment and growth, still, if he was to implement the government manifesto or the government in power, if he doesn't do it in consonance with the Vienna Conventions, he will get in conflict, whether it's career or not career.
Sarah, would you had a question actually you asked?
Yeah, yes, you see, as a funder which is submitting, I sit here as a Ugandan and I'm like, how about Project Uganda? Institutions of government are permanent. Institutions or pillars of the state are not driven by regime. That's in an ideal country or nation. That is an example of the US. I know we are getting there soon as we conclude. Look at the US elections. US has two major parties, Republican and Democrats. But the US has states, State Department, Pentagon that runs security, the other institutions. Whoever comes in through elections works with these institutions. But these institutions run the interests of America, regardless of who is in White House. So in an ideal country, that's what it should be. But we have a fusion and capture of state institutions by regime. So that's the response. That which has rightly given is a response in accordance with the status quo, but is not the ideal. Quickly, what is the job of diplomatic missions? Representation, acting as official representatives of their home country to the host nation, maintaining and promoting diplomatic relations. This does not change whether it's NRM, UPs, or FDC in power. The second job is protection of citizens. Assisting and protecting the rights and interests of their country's citizens living in that host nation. That's why this very ambassador was just, among other issues, for abusing and attacking NUP supporters and depicting, partisan conduct when she's a diplomat, violating the Vienna Convention. The third job, promotion of trade and economic interests. This does not change. Whether you bring Obote, Idani, Nirutwa, Uganda will always have these interests. The third is cultural exchange, information gathering, negotiation, issuing of visas and passports. These are jobs of diplomatic missions. They don't change. What can change is to say, NRM, we are promoting investors. But you think under Obote we had no investors? We had them. You think under Ruto we had no investors? Or we had no people living in Canada? So, the Vienna Convention assumes that a country has normal thinking citizens able to represent it in these functions. But unfortunately, in our situation, the conduct of a the conduct of a normal or noble person does not exist anymore. I've been saying that and unfortunately I will continue referring to Chitezi, that the Chitezi garbage tragedy is just a symptom of the political tragedy that we are going through in this country.
Yeah.
And these deportations are a demonstration of the rot. So you have garbage falling on poor citizens in Chitezi. You have political garbage falling on citizens abroad, in Dubai, in Canada. This is political garbage crumbling down. The web garbage is burying people here. You have garbage at the diplomatic front. There is no difference. It's stinking. So how should one become a diplomat to the top level of representing a country? You're carrying a flag. The flag you're carrying is a Ugandan flag. It's not an NRM. Uganda embassy in Canada. It's not an NRM embassy in Canada. Some of these buildings are permanent thanks to Amin and the other previous governments. Because NRM all it has done has been selling or stealing some of the properties, like in Mombasa, where our properties changed names into individual figures within the establishment. Yes, they have not bought any property abroad, have they?
No,
but most of these embassies are in Uganda houses, built under previous regimes. So that's what it means. When you go to Uganda house in London, Uganda house in New York, I mean, it's Uganda house. It's not NRM house. So you have this you have this ambassador. I was even thinking she was a deputy ambassador. It's unfortunate that she was the head of a diplomatic entity. Very unfortunate. Because obviously she doesn't qualify. So you have this ambassador wearing yellow, walking like a clown on Canadian streets, abusing citizens that she's supposed to protect and represent in that host country. I don't know whether she was at your function when she was dancing in yellow with yellow people. Because you are in charge of diaspora. So
make your submission. Make your submission.
So obviously somebody should have told her that she's a clown. Even if she came to that function, you advise her and say, wear neutral colors, sit as an observer, because that's what is required of an ambassador. I'm not saying she can't attend, but she should have attended as an observer at that event, not as a participant demonstrating and dancing on the streets and abusing opposition. So even Canada was so generous to this woman. Because if I was a president in that country, she would have boarded the next flight on deportation orders. You violate even the host institution and its generosity to your country. And it might take a while until we have an ambassador there, because I'm sure the background check, and maybe even Canada prefers now a career diplomat. So what is the difference between these political appointees and career diplomats? Career diplomats are trained throughout their career. They joined at level 6, the Foreign Service Officer 6. By the time you get to 1, you have the training, you have the grooming, you have the experience. I can bet that any Foreign Service personnel can never conduct themselves in this vulgar manner.
Joseph.
It's really the death of our nation. It died domestically in Chitezi and went and they killed it in Canada. And they stole it totally, sinking it in Dubai.
Dubai minister running a gambling against.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine? A head of diplomacy.
Terrible. Quickly, in 1970, Museveni joined public service after studying freely using our money thanks to UPC in Dar es Salaam University. So in part, as Sarah said, public service interviews that I missed, I only missed because Museveni chased me from Makerere University. You graduate and you go through public service interviews, graduates. Yeah. And also,
you wanted to join foreign service?
Parastate organizations. I possibly wouldn't have gone to foreign service actually, to be fair. But I'm just saying, I failed to join the pool of public services. So then people, parastators and then big commercial organizations like banks, both private, both local and international, use those opportunities to basically spread jobs, and you get through interviews, you get through screening. Museveni's first was in president's office as a researcher, and of course, word has it that he was recruited as a spy is not true, and was recruited as UPC is not true. Nobody knew him. The person who recruited him then was Wilson Okwenje, who later on became
But on merit.
But pure on merit, and that's basically the point. And so he basically went there as a research assistant, and it took him to where he is. But I want to say this, that Museveni started killing institutions and critical institutions just as he landed in power. In terms of foreign services, I've got direct experience. Not only am I officially a UPC diplomat, and possibly an informal UPC Foreign Affairs Minister for a long time. In 1986, when Museveni came to power, the first thing he did with the academic institution called Makerere University was to break it. He broke Makerere by killing the process of making sure that professional vice-chancellors who take on positions on merit. In this case, there was a DP vice-chancellor, Professor Asavia Orindira, possibly the best vice-chancellor in the last 45 years, whom Obote found and Obote did not change, who at the time was actually the chairperson of the Commonwealth Vice-Chancellors Association, something along those lines. Museveni quickly removed him after he had, amongst others, accused university lecturers of wanting to overthrow his government. And university lecturers were extremely furious. And one lecturer actually told me, down close to University Hall, that, look, what does this man expect us to overthrow his government with? He was throwing bombs. Does he expect us to overthrow his government using chalks or pens? Because at the time, most of the teaching was still using chalks and those boards. So he removes Asavia Orindira, a fantastic vice-chancellor. Vice-chancellorship, regardless of your profession, ideally people with administrative backgrounds and things like that. So he throws in George Kiria, Professor Kiria, who was then Dean of Medicine, Faculty of Medicine. It turns out Kiria had been helping them allegedly with stealing our medicine to give them in the bush, or possibly treating some of their people. Patronage, beginning of patronage. Kiria was extremely unpopular as Vice-Chancellor of Makerere University at the time. Interestingly, the first public appearance of Professor Kiria, he came to the South African School of Librarianship, and the dean asked me actually to move a vote of thanks to George Kiria. George Kiria is now retired. He's a decent guy.
Yeah.
And we'll come to the story, So he becomes, that's him. Kiria and Museveni arrest me, torture me, detain me, exile me. But Kiria finds me in UK. Museveni goes on to appoint Kiria as Uganda's High Commissioner to London. Now, credit to Kiria. Throughout the time Kiria was there, the career versus the others, I led tens of demonstrations against this NRA regime. Our people stood in front of Uganda House, predominantly under my leadership and direction, or at least I was always involved. We went and humiliated them in Parliament. I even humiliated Kiria in 1999 at a Labour Party conference, in which he came, oh, hello, my brother, at a day of leader speech. And then I said, but George, what are you doing here? You guys have banned political parties. Of course, I was making my political point. He was just basically nice about it and moved on. But now that is reasonable distance of an average citizen. I fundamentally disagree with him. I want to make sure that at some stage I can have tea with him, because he's an old responsible Ugandan citizen, whatever it is. But that was now killing of some of this diplomatically now. The other thing is the most renowned Ugandan ambassador to UK in the last 50 years was Ugandan Asian Shafika Rain, who led the mission between 1980 and 85. Again, he was not necessarily a career diplomat. He was actually a top UPC politician and a post-top leader. These are people who worked on the Departed Asians Custodian Board, working on reorganizing Uganda's image and interacting investors, persuading Ugandan Asians and others to come back and say Uganda is home to business. So in a way, there is an element of that contradiction. But in any case, we can now say
you can have a branded.
I'm coming to that.
Yes,
So generally, I was going to come back to that. In fact, let me just make that point. That the problem is not only the fact of career diplomacy. The problem is what Sarah says, this thing of patronage, where Museveni picks junks and failures to serve Museveni's interest, NRA's interest second, and their interest and only interest using Uganda. So then when you find someone like Ruth, who may have been agents of NRA but in the UPC, goes to Canada, and you can see she's playing the Canada thing almost like, these guys, you can see what's happening, boys of PLU, whatever kind of stuff. We want to perfect the art that we are here and we're busy chasing for money.
Many people keep asking, but that's full figure. But because the display was the same.
So
the optics were the same.
So these guys are there busy trying to justify their loot, justify the theft, justify their positions, qualify the right opportunity to the next few billions, all of which are really your money. So these guys don't do that. Now, but that said, if you see how Museveni got into the public service in 1970 versus how Kiria became a vice chancellor and a diplomat, tells you that under NRA, I think there's 8 diplomatic missions, official embassies, I'm told. Do they have, not sure the number. Some of them may be ghost embassies. Anyway, these days, considering what somebody was saying the other day, I don't know how many people who now qualify as career diplomats. If in any case, I don't know the last time the civil public service interviews, where you say young graduates finish and then they go and they join on merit. In any case, it will be somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's friend, or poor girl who's 21 just because she looks beautiful enough, and somebody's taking her up for somebody's, if you like, maybe even jobs for sex without prejudice kind of stuff. This is what's going on in this system. I have had relatives, including one who was supposed to have joined the public organization, and the poor boy was told to pay 1.4 million Uganda shillings,
As a bribe.
And as a bribe.
Oh,
as a precondition for precisely a bribe, basically, as a preset for this very particular position, not so long ago. So these are the things which are going. So in a way, like Sarah was saying, it's basically a manifestation of Kitezi, and Kitezi manifestation of the mess that we're having in this country. So it's really, really sad. Now, the UPC thing that I must just call it. Interestingly, Awich and I were chatting the other day, and he's absolutely right that maybe it does not augur very well, does not look very well. So if I was president of UPC at Uganda House, even if these guys were merely agents in UPC, we've got a right to also put up our hands to that well. It dents the image of my party. And so for that reason, I am even much more furious that anybody in UPC, including Jim McKenna, take responsibility for playing the mess in which either they use dubious people who are agents in NRA, or play NRA and make sure that people like a chain end up in NRA. In any case, a chain's thing is very specific because it's true that a chain is one of those people with whom a discussion between Jimmy and others on positions, including of Betty, arose. Hence the beginning of Ruth beginning to campaign in Lango, for Mr. Museveni. So basically, Canada thing was an open reward. And we can't pretend about it because these things are sad. So this is not about Uganda People's Congress, it's not about Lango, it's not about the Republic of Uganda, but it's not about individuals or personalities, but basically how messy we turn that country.
Thank you. Actually, we have very, very few minutes left to go. Major, as you respond to this, I also have a question. Do you think, and that's what a lot of Ugandans, I believe, are asking themselves out there, is this the point at which we actually have an introspection as a country and rethink our strategies, how we engage both domestically and abroad in terms of getting citizens of a certain caliber to actually represent us and our interests?
Of course we do it. I know the school of thought, which has, I saw something talking of a government of incompetent people. I don't want something crassy. Something crassy, I had it. The thinking, of course, which could be erroneous, is that the school of thought which says that we have increasingly continued to have incompetent people access position of responsibility. That school of thought seems to think that many people are awarded because of incompetent than competency. It's a erroneous school of thought though, because it is not what is happening. They seem to think that if two people came, A and B, and one is competent, A is competent, B is not competent, that school of thought says that
B will
be awarded.
Yes.
And they keep giving list. I think they raised issues when this other RDC was appointed. Parliament also objected. The deputy RDC, Kisai Mukama, they raised a lot of dust about it. But I would like to assure...
and NRM ignored.
I would like to assure the viewers that in NRM, great consideration is put to competency of cadres. You must have a demonstrable capacity. Capacity is not compromised. So whoever Museveni has appointed, he has considered is competent. And he has wide areas of judgment. And so the viewers should be assured about that. Now, you can make a sense of judgment, and individual material condition can challenge. You don't blame it on the president, but the president give due consideration. So, it is not only time to consider as you ask, but it has been an ongoing exercise that cadres who are appointed are given the appointed competent cadres. And especially, I know for a fact that President Museveni takes due consideration, especially in the soberness of mind in as far as alcohol is concerned. Many of our cadres are expected to be sober, to have good education, and even at higher position, the president tasked intelligence organization to file a report on each and every person appointed.
Is it possible that he gets wrong intel sometimes? That could also, well, he may mean well, but maybe the intel
that could be
not accurate.
That could be because I know the president gets total intelligence report on everybody appointed. And this intelligence is not only to show the loyalty to NRM or otherwise, but the intelligence to ensure that if the person alleges to have finished university, the intelligence will tell him, no, he stopped in second year. If the person alleges to be a doctor, the intelligence will say, no, he's a nurse or he's a medical officer. So this intelligence is supposed to be so thorough to get the ingredient quality of the person. So the president does this. Ministers, ambassadors, everybody. And that's what we call intelligence vetting. So it is not correct, therefore, by the other school of thought who says that increasingly incompetence accessing position at the expense of competent people. That if A and B comes, B is incompetent, A is in fact, they go much fire to even insult some of us to say that, you know, Awich, if you came to NRM with your brain, once you start working, you are expected to pull away, put it aside.
Put it in the order.
Put it and work. No, I like to assure viewers that, is not the case.
Thank you for bringing that out. Eh?
Yeah, it is what they say. I can only correct it if I bring it forward. I can't hide it and correct it. I can only bring it and correct it. So I just like to assure viewers that competence is paramount because intelligence are tasked to give vetting. Even the recent leaders of parliamentary leaders, committees, I was in the body that was vetting the committees of parliament. We stayed it for a long time because we had to get real vetting from intelligence. Some people purport educational academic qualification while not. Some people purport a profession while not. So this is done.
Does this sometimes disregard some of these information that
it doesn't? Only that this information can be right and the president considers it. But individual character may not be, you can't do intelligence on individual behaviors. A person can be silent. You don't know what it becomes or she becomes after starting the work. So I like to assure viewers that contrary to these other schools of thoughts, competence is paramount, sanity of mind is paramount, and the president takes all due into consideration. Then we leave it to work.
Circumstances.
Thank you very much. Let's just move to, we're actually running out of time. I would have loved for you to respond, but I think let's, in the interest of time, let's move on to the last issue, which is the US elections. Kamala Harris has been endorsed. She's had full endorsement from all those, the big names and figures in the Democratic Party. The convention comes to an end, I think, in the next 7 hours or so. Just your quick thoughts, starting with you, Sarah.
I think for me, one is the joy we feel when we witness countries that are democratic, where people are free, where every party can organize, every party can raise their funding, and even when a party is in power, when it comes to competition for re-election, there's a level playing field. And I like ours, really, where it's just one bull in the crowd, marshalling all state organs to intimidate citizens and make sure they keep power by all means, by both hook and crook. So if for us, we feel happy, to watch countries that are run normally to some extent. Why am I saying to some extent? My eyes as an election observer are on the issues driving the election and the integrity of the electoral system, but also whether the culture of conceding defeat will this time prevail, given what we witnessed with the the ally cat in America's democracy with, unfortunately, President Trump. And because his behavior has really shocked some of us. He was like one of the dictators in a less developed country. You failed to concede defeat, which was contrary to all other presidential candidates. You don't only stop at that, you mobilize hooligans to attack the capital. You intend to violate the constitution, and you again run for office. Then, of course, we are saying, I think he has about 34 convictions. That's also interesting to watch how civilized countries work. But you have somebody trying to upset the whole civilization and take such a developed country backwards. So it's an interesting space to watch. The organization, the level of organization, I wish our parties were free to organize in their small ways. I know they can't reach that level. That's a superpower. But even with at your own small level, you can be organized and they can do such conventions if they had the freedoms that we discussed earlier. The issues determining the elections, the economy, the inflation. So you have clear issues laid out: healthcare, abortion rights, immigration, climate change. And as the cream of the Democratic Party in the US came to the platform to express themselves, the issues were clearly laid out: freedom versus, Oprah nailed it, common sense versus nonsense. You had the Obamas, you had the Michelle saying this is a black job that this guy is seeking. So really the level, it's up there. And I wish to live in such a country one time.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Joseph, your insights.
Absolutely.
Just 3 minutes.
Absolutely. The reason why I finding myself, Sarah, in exile, one of the things that continued to drive me, is the taste of that freedom, the taste of democracy, and the taste of quality. And you young Ugandans, by the way, democracy is sweet.
Yeah.
An environment and the circumstances in which you're able to emerge from some of our young camera ladies here to the possibilities of the Harris tomorrow is fantastic. And the possibilities of being inspired by Sarah, but you're not particularly sure, and you can go and improve yourself on training and mentorship and go and learn on television and be allowed to make mistakes and then to turn around and change and to move on is fantastic. So it's beautiful in there. So no, I totally agree and good luck to them. I must say though that Trump started with his hate thing as early as the time when Barack Obama first expressed interest in the leadership of the Democratic Party. Trump was the first person to begin to run with the propaganda that Obama was not born in America. And he ran with it, that thing failed. and that Obama was a Muslim, as if being a Muslim is a crime, and that flopped. And it's actually when Obama beat the odds and beat Hillary Clinton, and beat the odds and then went on to become the first African American president. Trump then went on to mobilize and galvanize the radical core of hate of Anglo-Saxon establishment, the white supremacist thing, that white power is gone. At the time, one of the arguments that was being made, Sarah and Comrade Awich, is that that you've broken the racial ceiling with Barack Obama and with the fantastic wife Michelle, and killing the myth that Africans don't know how to organize and mobilize family. My fantastic, handsome brother Barack Obama goes to White House, and not a single, not a single incident of scandal, except the Nieras was saying the other day, this Libyan question, which in any case was pushed by David Cameron, and he never forgave him. But regardless, if you see when we're discussing UPC versus NRM and things like that, it was a notch up down there. What does it mean? It meant, therefore, that a successful two-term Barack Obama, unless the white right America woke up. Because of the demographics, meaning, therefore, women who are normally gender progressive, that's why I love you guys here, and then two, young people who will tend to generally also be more progressive than others and open-minded, and so therefore, in political left versus right kind of stuff, more likely to vote a progressive left Democratic Party rather than a conservative Republican. And then finally, therefore, the minorities were increasing in numbers, particularly Hispanics and blacks, meaning that conservative America was unlikely to regovern in the near future. So that was the death of this whole thing. And many people didn't see it. Mainstream media, including perhaps the progressive media networks like CNN, whereas they support the Democratic Party, they don't want to raise this because remember, the bottom line is their interest is still much more about Caucasian interests rather than the broader interest. So that's important. It is nice that the gamble pays off when Biden takes on the leadership of the Democratic Party and therefore governs America. He was really struggling the other time of this age thing, and when this came, when it was almost a possibility that Trump was going to make a comeback. And the beauty of this contestation, I think you're here, Comrade Rich, you remember, when we had a conversation that, no, it is over. And remember, I think I plus one other person said, well, in politics, one day it can be like ages. So anything can happen. Biden resigns, Harris comes, an African, decent African woman comes up, the tide is turned around, politics of issues, political strategies as we're trying to discuss the diplomatic things. Americans very quickly see that, hang on a second, Trump again, and Trump, we may not disagree, Trump again, that who says yes to Russia and wanting to break the European Union. The American psyche is woken up, politics of strategy and issues and intelligence comes up, and here we are, the Democratic Party concluding this, they're almost certainly on the verge of a possibility of a Harris presidency, meaning therefore the first, not only woman, but the first, in this case, African woman being the president of the United States, and so therefore the leader of the free world.
Thank you.
What a fantastic, exciting, interesting time and looking forward. We are delighted it's not for nothing. The future is possible. You guys just believe, keeping believing in better.
Thank you, Joseph. Major Awich.
Well, my comment about this is that for a long time, America has postured itself as the leader of the civilized world. And I thought if they were to be, they would rather do us a service and indeed be. Because, their hands are being seen with lots of cries. If you're to be a leader of a civilized world, what do you say about when you even have the capacity to stop bloodshed around the world and you don't? If you even judge bloodshed selectively. So that challenges a leader of the civilized world. So if they are, I really pray that they do it with a good heart. Recently I was in Rwanda for inauguration of Kagame, and the West didn't approve of Kagame's democracy or Rwanda's democracy. For the start, Rwandans voted for Kagame 99%, but Kagame's RPF nearly lost election because the coalition of the other party had the majority. In other words, if it was in the Ugandan situation, NUP members voted for Museveni and NRM voted for Museveni. But when it comes to voting for MPs,
yes.
NRM didn't win the MPs. So in other words, the country said, yes, he's a good man, but for this other party saying no. Now, the West said that was not democracy. Now, in one of the forums I was in, they knew I was in Rwanda, they asked me, have you met any of those other people from established democracies? Then my reply was, which democracy? The one of Trump, where a presidential candidate is shot in broad daylight.
Okay.
And even Trump said that it took a bullet for democracy. Is that the democracy we are talking about? And you said ours is not. The leader of the civilized world, they're shooting themselves in broad daylight in the name of democracy. If it had happened in Uganda, we would have got lectures and lectures. If a presidential candidate, even like who was this young man who was moving around, the last candidate?
Katumba.
Katumba. Imagine Katumba's ears was shot in a rally, or Bobby Wine. How much lectures would you have got? So, my prayer is...
That's why you carry them and even undress them.
That is why we protect them, maybe, if that is what we want. But the point here is, if our brothers in the United States are leaders of a true civilization, they should stand to mean what it is. Not what Sarah is saying, that you even organize hooligans to attack. So they should really walk the talk, be the leader of civilization and exhibit it. Otherwise, they will fall short of it. And it makes some school of thought says that their civilization is being challenged. Some put the case of Corona. Yeah. The civilization was meant to have the best health system. But the burial, if you saw on the video, on the TV,
because of the weather.
They are supposed to have tamed the nature to their advantage. Whether by warming the house or designing warm clothes. They are supposed to have tamed the nature by now. Nature should not be a matter. So the thing is, let our leaders of the civilized nation be what it is. Then let the other school of thought say they are going into a decaying civilization. A decaying civilization where even COVID tested it and found it very shaky, about to wipe them out. That was a test to the civilization, that you don't have the health system that you purport to be. You have the democracy where a presidential candidate is shot while talking. So, my prayer to our brothers of the civilized nation, that while we look upon you, do much more, and please walk the talk and stand to be the leader of the civilized nation.
Any response? Or we just, no. I think, thank you very much. Thank you, Major Awich. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. This is actually the end of this edition of Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back next Saturday, same time. Do follow us on YouTube on Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim. Have yourselves a wonderful day.